sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
Doobie-doobie-doo. What's going on, guys? Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. Go ahead and start us off right by hitting the like fam. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Rumble. Welcome back, guys. Great things are happening this week. I have some good news stories, which I'm very excited to share. I want to start off by giving shout outs to people in the chat. Let's dive right in. Shout out to P. Smith says, happy Thursday. Still think you're the best. Oh, thank you, P. Shout out to CBC Voter says, doobie doobie doo. Greetings, John Lee says, hi. Hi. Shout out to Tigers. Can't stand Shapiro. Thankfully, I can still change channels. Shout out to Judges says, mega death, we the people. Greetings, Brown Bunny says, mother has been stunting with all these outfits. Will Miss Salvati be serving this evening? Methinks she will be giving see you next Tuesday. Interesting. Not sure about that. Greetings, New York Varsity. As entertaining as the other subjects are, the most intriguing thing to me is the union thing. Looking forward, let's go shooby dooby doo. Yes, some good news, right? Shout out to Miguel says peace. Greetings, Lawrence says Shaka when the walls fell. What's going on? Hannah G says Governor Abbott is horrible. I agree. We're going to get into that. Shout out to, whoops, sorry, that's you again, Miguel. Shout out to David says, hello, Sabby, fascism is here. Yes, it is. We're going to dive into that tonight. Greetings, Max says, hola, desde Tijuana y Pacoma. Greetings. Shout out to Sebastian says, F the two-party system. That's right. Greetings, JB. My comrade from RBN says, forehead kisses. Good evening, everyone. I hope you all are feeling all right, and claps. Dynamite! We were talking about the Good Times animation earlier on RBN. Me and JB were talking about that. Shout out to Layers of the Snark says, I don't really know why Biden wants to do another 4 years, to be honest. He hasn't even done the last 4 years. That's a good one. That's a good one, Layers. Shout out to Shalom says, Pharaoh Chuck Schumer, let my people go for Hajj, which is Arabic Hajj. Let my people go. Shout out to Tim, though, says they are trying to silence us. This is really scary. The United States of Israel has been bought and paid for in every level and every institution, all the way to the White House. Disgusting. That's right, Tim, though. You know what's up. Shout out to Lorez says, hey, Sabrina, Eric, Corey, and Sabby fam. Sirota always has some good takes, then goes back to Biden's defense, just like the squad. Yeah. I agree with you there. We're going to get into that. Hilarious pic of him here. Smash the like, y'all. Shout out to, yeah, that picture is a trip. Shout out to Mark says, Sabby, wish me happy 68th. Happy birthday, Mark. Let's give Mark a big happy birthday. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday to ya. Happy birthday, Mark. Shout out to Sean. Says cool music. I think that is what he's saying there. Greetings, Retro Gamer says hello. Shout out to Casey, sends solidarity and fire. What is going on? Randy says good evening, my dear Sabby family. Shout out to Willem says just in time for some doobie doo. Greetings, Nikki's World says, hello, everyone. Hello, Governor. Greetings, Kill Your Gorger says, woohoo, yee, you. And I think there's beers there. So Kill Your Gorgers might be having a drink, a little bit of a beverage there. Maybe. Shout out to Eric T. Red says, hello, here we go. Yes, we go. Greetings, Alexander says, hi, Sabby. Shout out to Silver Surfer says, love, Sabby, peace, fellow commoners. And greetings, Nas says, love a punctual woman, Sabrina. Thank you. Yeah, it's a pet peeve of mine. Time. It is a pet peeve. Ashura says, Cuckpiro attacks. And greetings, Ellen says, hi, everyone. Shout out to Ali says, hi, everyone. Doobie do. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and dive right in. We have quite a bit to discuss. I'm excited for it. I hope you are too. Let's go ahead and give a shout out to Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. You're keeping the lights on around me. Keep the lights on. All right. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories. Ultimate, Sabinators. There's also Sabsters. They're doing the damn thing. Don't forget about those Sabbies. And of course, there are members. Doom, doom, doom. I don't know why I said that way for members, but there are also members as well. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really do appreciate it. You're doing the damn thing. Yeah. Yeah. We're going to have a little bit of fun tonight. I'm going to play a little bit of music later. We're going to have a little bit of fun. But what are we going to discuss tonight? Let's go ahead and share that thumbnail there. I hope you guys are liking my new thumbnails. I know some of you reached out and said, these look better. Yeah, I think it does look better. Tonight, we are discussing Ben Shapiro attacks Tucker Carlson. This is not the first time Ben has come after Tucker Carlson. Ben is not happy with the tuck. So we're going to get into that. We're also going to discuss David Sirota defends Joe Biden. And then to that point that was made earlier in the chat, it's true. David Sirota may have good takes on certain issues, but he always seems to find his way back to defending Joe Biden for some reason or making excuses for Joe Biden. We're going to get into that tonight. We're also going to discuss Governor Abbott targets protesters. This is probably one of the biggest stories of the week. We've talked about the campus protests. Governor Abbott has definitely taken things to the extreme. So we're going to get into that and what that means for our First Amendment rights in this country, whether you agree with the issue being protested or not. And last but not least, an amazing, heartfelt story, the UAW Volkswagen win. And you can see in the picture there, that young woman is holding up a sign that says union. Yes, this is historic news in this country. And you'll see why in just a second. So let's go ahead and dive right in. I'm super pumped and excited to talk about that story. And I think we're going to go ahead and get started with that one. The UAW, the United Auto Workers, they have been doing the damn thing. In the beginning, when they announced their strike, you guys may remember, I didn't agree with the strategy that they wanted to do. I didn't agree with this strategic strike strategy where they were going to strike at maybe 1 or 2 locations and then spread from there. I wanted all locations to go on strike at once, but it seemed to have worked for them. And I came back and I said, my bad, my bad. Don't agree with them, going forward with endorsing Joe Biden. I did not agree with that. But Sean also said, Sean's the president of the UAW, that even though the union decided to endorse Joe Biden as president, that most of the union members, he said, are not going to be voting for Joe Biden. So I thought that was interesting. You have to understand that a lot of these unions are paid to endorse certain politicians. So that's important for people to understand. But one of the things that the UAW president Sean said is that this was going to be a part of a much larger project, that they were actually going to encourage other auto workers to also go on strike and also try to unionize with the UAW. And we're seeing the first of that success This is a historic win here in this country because now Volkswagen workers in Tennessee have decided to unionize through the UAW. This has never been done before. We're going to get into this story, starting out with some good news. Let's give it up for the damn workers.
Workers at a Volkswagen plant in Chattanooga, Tennessee, voted overwhelmingly to join the United Auto Workers Union, marking a major breakthrough for the labor movement in America. On Friday, some 73% of workers at the Tennessee plant voted in favor of joining the UAW. This is the first time that a foreign car maker's plant in the South has voted to unionize. Now, this is a huge deal because the American South has been skeptical and even hostile toward labor unions for decades.
Pause there for a second. So some of you may not have been aware of that. I lived in the South before, so I was aware of that. Some people actually are wondering, they're like, wow, I didn't know there was a Volkswagen, plant or Volkswagen workers in the United States. I thought Volkswagen was made in Germany. But there are still Volkswagen workers here. Just like in South Carolina, there's also a BMW plant that actually employs a lot of people in South Carolina. In fact, I knew a lot of people that worked at that BMW plant there. So, but this is huge news. And this is just the beginning because now that Volkswagen has decided to do this, the employees have decided to do it. This could also, create a domino effect for other auto workers in the South. So they may have started a thing. Let's continue.
Republican leaders and the business community in the South have warned for years that unionizing would mean a loss of jobs. And this Chattanooga Volkswagen plant had previously voted against joining the UAW twice, in 2014 and again in 2019. All of this comes about 5 months after UAW workers ratified historic new contracts with record wage gains and improved benefits at the big three automakers in Detroit. With this win out of Tennessee, the UAW will expand its focus to other southern plants, hoping to organize at least half a dozen more over the next 2 years. Another vote will take place next month at a Mercedes-Benz plant in Alabama. Joining me now to talk about the power of American labor movement is Sarah Nelson, International President for the Association of Flight Attendants. And while you're not
Pause for just a second. Sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to pause there for just a second that said, did you hear what he said about the Mercedes-Benz plant in Alabama? Now they're looking to create some type of union, to unionize with the UAW. This is what I'm saying, guys. This is going to spread, which is good news. A lot of times when I come onto the show, I say something is going to spread and it's bad news, but this is actually good news that is going to spread. They are doing the damn thing.
An auto worker, Sarah, there are similarities between the auto workers and the auto workers union in the North and the sort of things that have gone on with flight attendants and airline workers. There's a lot of history here, and this feels really monumental to me.
This is monumental, Ali. This is an extraordinary win, but it is coming off the backs of the strike and showing the American worker that we can fight and we can change the conditions in this country. Every single person across the country is working 2 and 3 jobs to survive. Forced overtime, our time and our money has been taken from us. And so this is not just a fight in the South, although the South is really where we've got to win big, because this is where workers have been exploited the most, oftentimes to attract companies from outside the country and to bring those companies in on the backs of the workers who have subsidized those companies with low wages and a lot more time on the job.
Yes. And another thing that I want to add here that I think is also important, we need to think about what this really means. When Starbucks employees went on strike, when Chipotle employees went on strike, when all of these different restaurant employees were trying to, create a union, or they received a lot of pushback. There were some Starbucks locations that decided to close permanently instead of just allowing these employees to unionize. Some of the Starbucks locations decided to fire employees that were trying to unionize. I've interviewed some of them on the show. So there were a number of challenges that these employees were met with when they tried to create a union. One of the things that I said back then is, what if the Starbucks employees, along with Chipotle, McDonald's, and all these other restaurant employees all got together and tried to create, some type of union together? What if they all decided to join hands in this? And I think about how more powerful that would have been at that point in time if they were doing that. At that time, everybody was just kind of fighting for their own thing, but they actually would have had more power if other restaurant employees would have united across restaurant lines, right? So the UAW apparently figured that out. And when they decided to go on strike, again, they warned people early on that this isn't just about UAW. This isn't just about the plants here. We are going to expand this. We are going to get other auto workers to unionize as well. And as we can see, that is happening. So kudos for them to stick into their word.
Sarah, talk to me about the threats. During the strike, the thing that came out was always, you're going to lose your jobs. In fact, some of the automakers started shutting down plants and laying off workers. That's always the threat. Prices will go up. You'll lose jobs. Bad for everyone. It has worked in the past as a fear-mongering tactic. What's changed in the last year or two?
What's changed is that workers see that tactic is a tactic to continue to make us desperate for this work, to make us feel lucky that we should have a job, rather than helping these companies understand that they should feel lucky to have our work. And so workers are saying it has gone backwards for so long, and the only place that we're seeing a difference is in corporate greed. This is all of our work, all of our time has been pushed to Wall Street. It has been pushed to billionaires. And if we don't take a stand, it's never going to change. So those threats of closing those plants is a near-term threat. But what UAW was able to do was to lock in long-term job security and even job security as the EV industry continues to grow.
And that was very smart of them. They obviously had a plan. They didn't just try to throw something together. They were thinking about how is this going to benefit us in the long term. And we'll get into the general strike strategy in just a second, because that was another thing that they also talked about doing in the near future. But she's 100% correct there, spot on, when she says that we have basically been brainwashed, at least in this country, that we should be happy that we even have a job, instead of the other way around. The employers should be happy to have us as employees, because without the workers, do you continue to have a business? No workers, no business. No business, no customers, right? So all of these things are connected. And when all of these employees decide to go on strike or decide to unionize, they are basically telling their employer that we know our worth and that you don't value our work.
We saw strikes or threats of strikes in the last year, and in many cases, remarkable successes that came out of them, from the Teamsters, from the United Auto Workers, from SAG-AFTRA. In your industry, there were several of those close calls in some cases. What's the issue with the South, and why is there movement in the South that we've not seen?
Look, I think we're seeing movement in the South because people are just really hurting. And they're fed up. The pandemic showed us that not only have we been treated as a cost line item with all of these companies, but actually that we were treated as disposable. You had people in meat packing plants being forced to go in there, and you had executives laughing about who was going to be the first worker to die from COVID. So we have seen very clearly that we're in this together across industries. Flight attendants are fighting right now for record-breaking contracts, and just like the auto workers were. And we need a giant step forward, because we're also facing legacy sexism that has kept the value of our jobs lower than it should be. We're fighting to get paid for our time at work. This is a major issue across industries, that workers are forced to do work where they're not paid at all. And so these are some of the same issues that we're fighting across the board in every industry. And when other workers see that workers are winning, that encourages them to stand up. We're organizing 28,000 flight attendants at Delta Airlines. And I can tell you, they were watching this vote. They were watching to see that workers in the South could win. That's a Southern company based in Atlanta. This meant something to them. This spoke to their heart. This is their communities. They know people in those plants. They often have brothers or sisters or mothers or fathers or uncles, aunts, and they can relate to this. So this is very much, a connection between workers and the basic connection around humanity, and what we have to stand up for and expect that This economy needs to be built for us, not for the billionaires.
One other thing I want to add too about unionization in the South. Let's think back to the Great Migration. Remember, during the Great Migration, when you had Black people from the South, they were moving to the Northeast and they were moving to the Midwest. They moved to what used to be pretty thriving cities that had a lot of manufacturing jobs at that point in time. So they moved to places like Chicago, Indianapolis, they moved to Pittsburgh, they moved to Philadelphia, all these different places during that point in time. What you have to remember, a lot of the unions existed in those areas. A lot of the people that moved to Chicago that were working at these plants, remember, they were unions. They had that there. Whereas in the South, having that same or similar job, they didn't have that. So they saw that great opportunity in those cities. And that was one of the reasons why they moved, because that's where a lot of the jobs were, and they could be part of a union. Now, there were differences in between those unions. I'm sure we all know. But we have to realize, and I've said this for a long time, sometimes it can take the South a little bit longer to come around to things that the East, the Northeast, and the West Coast, and even sometimes the Midwest is already doing. And sometimes, and I noticed this when I lived in the South, like sometimes those things wouldn't happen in the South until years later. So that's why this is such a big deal. Because they were very much against this. You heard so yourself a couple years ago. He said that the workers, they decided to vote against trying to join the UAW. But we also have this issue with inflation. The economy is not good for the everyday working American in this country. And so people are using their brains and they're looking around and they're like, wait a minute now, these grocery prices are increasing. The gas prices are starting to increase again. The economy is not doing well, despite what Joe Biden is saying. And at the same time, I have this job and I've been working at this plant for 10, 15, some of these people 20 years, right? And I'm not even a part of a union. I don't really have any rights that I thought I did. And then they see the UAW getting a win. So it always helps when you see employees going on strike, getting a win, because that encourages other people to try to do the same thing.
Sarah, great to see you. Thank you this morning. I know you made some accommodations to join us this morning, so we're deeply appreciative of that. Sarah Nelson is the international president of the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, AFL-CIO. Hey, everyone.
Goodbye, Allie. Yeah, so huge news. We're starting out with a good story, but I also want to remind you what Sean Fain said when they decided to go on strike. Yes, he did say this was going to expand to other auto industries. That was their plan. But there was something else that he said they are going to do later on. And if this happens, this is going to be really huge. Those of us at RBN have been calling for this for years.
Something that's not talked about a lot, but it's very significant, is we set a new contract deadline for May the 1st, 2028, May Day, International Solidarity Day. We did this for two reasons. I've always thought in my walk as a union rep that September was the worst time in the world to be going out on strike because sales start lagging when we get into the winter months. May made a hell of a lot more sense, but it also made sense to do it in a unified approach. We got to get back to the days, we got to pay for our sins of the past. Back in 1980, when Reagan at the time fired the Patco workers, everyone in this country should have stood up and walked the hell out. We missed the opportunity then, but we're not going to miss it in 2028. That's the plan. We want a general strike. We want everybody walking out, just like they do in other countries.
That part right there, the call for a general strike. So their contract ends in 2028. And the plan that they want to bring forward is to establish a general strike by that time. And if you're talking about a general strike, you do need time to plan for that. That's not something that you can do overnight. You have to make sure you have enough mutual aid. You have to make sure you have enough resources to take care of everyone that's going on strike. But the reality is, if those people aren't working, the parts don't move. The parts don't move. The cars aren't put together. The cars aren't put together. The cars are not sold. It's just the reality of the situation. So just wanted to remind you of what he said back then, that they wanted to move forward for a general strike. And those of us at RBN, we've been calling for this for years. The very first year that we actually formed, we had a general strike summit. It was like a big deal for us. Apparently, it made a lot of noise. A lot of people were really upset about us talking about why we need a general strike. It was really weird. But you're going to see more people starting to call for this because, again, the politicians are not helping the people. Obviously, the corporations are not going to help the people, and the oligarchs are against the working people, right? So as we've said before, the main thing that you need to happen is a general strike. You have to find a way to disrupt those flow of goods and services. And that is not something that you can do overnight, but at a point, we will get to that in this country, I believe, if things continue the way that they are. So shout out to the workers at Volkswagen for taking a stand. Hopefully this spreads throughout the South and really makes some noise. Yeah. JB says, yeah, it was a 3-day summit. It was ahead of its time. It was. It definitely was. People were not trying to talk about it at that point in time. But we were. Let's go to some of the comments here. Justo says, yes, they are like that in Missouri. They play videos before a job to tell you not to join a union and snitch on people who do. Wild, isn't it? Dr. Nick says Volkswagen made in Mexico. Oh, Mexico. It used to be made in Germany. I guess they decided to get cheap with their parts too. JB says, when they said the South will rise again, I bet this isn't what they had in mind. Ha ha ha. No, it's not. Shout out to Troy for the super chat. 1, more unions. 2, we need more worker co-ops. I agree. 100%. You know what, I always say on here, a union should never be the end game. The end game should always be worker co-ops. If we can go a step further. Thank you, Paula, for the super chat. I live in Chattanooga. It was truly great to see. What is up, Paula? What's up, fam? The Oracle says, and let's not overlook the fact that the South is really the plantation South. There you go. I told you, when I lived down South, we always got things last. Pastor Wheeler. Hello. The Massachusetts Teachers Union and the Massachusetts teachers have unions and they aren't allowed to strike. Yes, there's a law in Massachusetts that unfortunately teachers are not allowed to go on strike. I call BS. I know that they have actually requested that the governor of Massachusetts remove that law, but I haven't seen that happen. But thank you for bringing that up as well. Thank you, Tony D, for the super chat. Thank you for your show. You are welcome. You are welcome. All right, guys, start us off right. Smash the like. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. All right. And thank you, Cool Blue. My area, Detroit, Michigan, is the car capital of the world. That's right. That's right. And thank you for this, Chris C. Hey, Sabby, hope you've been well. # free Palestine. Thank you so much. You are welcome. All right, guys, we are going to move into this next story here. This is a doozy. So just buckle up for this one. If you feel now is the time to get a beverage, go ahead and do so. You want to grab a little bit of poppity pop popcorn? Go ahead and take that in too, because this is going to become something. David Sirota, a journalist, writer, he created the movie Don't Look Up. Yeah, Don't Look Up. I saw that on Netflix, right? And one thing about David Sirota is like every now and then he'll have really good takes. He kind of reminds me of Robert Reich in a sense where they're really good at explaining what the problems are. They're really good at explaining the problems with the system, capitalism, all the things that working class people have to struggle with and battle with in this country. But then when it comes time to make a decision whether or not to leave this two-party system, that is where David still wants to try to find a way to defend the Democratic Party or defend Joe Biden or to just keep you in the two-party system. And that is the critique that I have about David Sirota. Now, he had a conversation on the Hill Rising about Joe Biden and the presidency. and what we should do come November 2024. I would have this conversation with David Sirota myself, but David Sirota blocks anyone who disagrees with him on Twitter. Like, it's just reality. I got blocked by this guy like a long time ago, and I'm just like, okay, whatever. And I did reach out. So I would have this conversation with him face to face, but apparently he doesn't want to talk to people that disagree with him. So this is how we have to do this. This conversation here that David Sirota had on Rising tells me that we still have a long way to go, that people still believe that there is some type of way to win through the two-party system, in particular in reference to this conversation, the Democratic Party. Let's dive in.
You examine a lot of smaller, I would say, like lower level instances of Democratic blockage, right down to this instance, which I had forgotten about, where a Democratic candidate in Michigan was offered $20 million to drop out of his current race and run against Rashida Tlaib. What's going on here?
Well, look, I think overall the culture of the Democratic Party has shifted to one that is explicitly hostile to primary contests in general across the board. I mean, this is a party that had vigorous primary contests all the way up, as far as I look at it, until 2008. I mean, people tend to forget that the 2008 presidential contest, it was supposed to be kind of a coronation for Hillary Clinton, and Barack Obama ran a tough primary against her, and she ran a tough primary against him.
We're going to go ahead and chime in here. So here's the first problem that I noticed. So let's say the good thing first. The positive about this, again, I told you he's really good at explaining the problems. Like, he'll tell you what the problems are. Yes, the Democratic Party does have a problem with primary challengers, but he doesn't go a step further and tell you the Democratic Party doesn't have a problem with money, though. The Democratic Party has a problem with anyone who tries to challenge the status quo. That is the big issue. Okay, because if you're someone that's not trying to challenge the status quo, if you're not their, chosen person, or you are their chosen person or whatever, at the end of the day, they're looking for someone that is going to keep things the same, someone that's not going to move too far to the right or too far to the left, even though the Democratic Party is pretty much still a right-wing party. But that's what they're looking for, someone who is status quo. This discussion here about the presidential election in 2008 with Barack Obama running against Hillary Clinton, he is correct when he says that the chosen person was actually Hillary Clinton. That was supposed to be her, way in. That was supposed to be her year. And then Barack Obama basically started to rise and basically begin to outshine Hillary Clinton. But I think this is not the best comparison when you're talking about the presidential election and the Democratic Party for 2024. The candidates that were running in the Democratic Party, Marianne Williamson, I forgot the guy's name. Damn. What's the other guy's name? Oh, this is bad. Oh my God, I can't remember his name. Marianne Williamson. This is really bad. Is it Dave? Dean Phillips. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris, for the save. That was bad. Marianne Williamson, Dean Phillips, and originally RFK Jr. before RFK Jr. left and ran independent. The difference between 2008 and 2024 is that in 2008, the incumbent was not a Democrat. In 2008, you got to remember, this is coming off of the heels of George W. Bush's presidency. So the president in the White House at that point in time was a Republican. George W. Bush wasn't running for re-election. Obviously, you can't run for re-election. Can't do it the second time, right? In a row. So this is why I don't like when people make that comparison to 2008. You can't compare the two. In 2008, there were multiple people that were running in that presidential race. Don't forget, Joe Biden was also one of the candidates in that presidential race, along with Hillary Clinton and along with Barack Obama. But the sitting president at that time was a Republican president who was already on his second term and could not run for re-election. This time around, it is very different because Joe Biden, who is a Democrat, is running for re-election. So the people who were challenging Joe Biden, they were challenging someone who is an incumbent and is running for re-election. That is a big difference between Hillary Clinton was the chosen person, but Barack Obama started to do well and he was the one that won. That was different because at the end of the day, they were just trying to get a Democrat in and get the Republicans, out. They didn't want a Republican to win again. So I don't think that's a fair comparison. Let's continue.
And this was considered all part of normal politics. This is no longer considered really a normal part of Democratic Party politics. That primary challenges up and down the ballot are not seen as something that strengthen potential general election nominees, but they are instead looked at as things that weaken candidates that should be avoided because it's a display of a back and forth fight over ideas, which supposedly weakens the party. I tend to see it the other way. I guess that makes me kind of old school, that I think that primaries are the thing that battle test your candidates before they become the general election nominee. But that culture has been kind of wrung out of the Democratic Party. And the problem is, when it comes to the presidential election, you now ended up with you've ended up with a nominee who didn't go through a tough primary, Joe Biden, who didn't really have to articulate much of a sharp political message for the last few years here, who is now the nominee, who is very unpopular and who is having to play a lot of catch up on some of the issues that he could have been sharpening himself on when it comes to politics and the election. Could have been sharpening that message, but that didn't happen because there was no primary. There was no real primary.
But why was that? See, this is where you have to go a step further. There was no real primary because, once again, the DNC made that decision. They were the ones that decided that there would not be primary debates. The DNC, again, what did we learn from the DNC fraud lawsuit? It's a corporation, right? So big money interest and the military industrial complex, they are the ones that are controlling the DNC. The DNC is controlling the Democratic Party, and they were the ones that made the decision that Joe Biden is going to be the nominee, regardless if he has primary challenger or not. See, this is where you have to go a step further and you have to call out the corruption and you have to call out the money interest. And this piece is missing from a lot of discussions. This is why Eric created something called, money, demands, solutions. This is why he created that. Because a lot of times we would see people talk about the problems, but they don't get to the root cause of it and then how you get around that. I think that's important to mention.
What do you say to Democrats who say, well, this is just because Biden is the incumbent, there's not going to be a primary this time. If there was no incumbent president, then we would have a real contest, but there wasn't a real primary, a movement against Barack Obama when he ran for re-election, that's really the issue. What's your response to that?
Well, look, you could certainly make that argument if the incumbent was relatively popular. But if we look back on the last 30, 40, 50 years of history, oftentimes when incumbent presidents are as unpopular as Joe Biden is in the polls, and we can discuss whether it's fair that he's that unpopular, but as a matter of fact, he is unpopular in public opinion surveys, that in the past, incumbents like that have faced vigorous primary challenges. I mean, Eugene McCarthy ran a vigorous primary contest against Lyndon Johnson. Ronald Reagan ran a very tough primary against Gerald Ford, who was very unpopular in 1976. Ted Kennedy ran a primary challenge against Jimmy Carter. Pat Buchanan ran a primary challenge against George H.W. Bush. So the point is that it's in some ways ahistorical that a president who is as unpopular as Joe Biden did not face a serious primary contest. And I think we have to ask ourselves, well, if it's ahistorical, then what really has changed? And I think that basically Democratic Party leaders and Democratic Party aligned media have done a very good job of selling rank and file Democratic voters on the idea that primaries should be looked at as a form of sedition and apostasy. Something disgusting and terrible, rather than part of the small d democratic process.
But why is that? See, this is the part that is not mentioned. You got to think back to the way things used to be. Think back to before we had super PACs, before we had PACs, before we had big money interests in electoral politics. Who's choosing the candidates? Wall Street, the military industrial complex. These are the things that are important to say. I think David knows this, and I don't understand why he's not saying this. You can't be in this field for this long covering politics. You worked on the Bernie campaign and not make the money and corruption connection. And that part is very important. So I think, again, what is happening is that David isn't telling you that, because David also later on, as you see in this discussion, he still wants you to participate in the Democratic Party. That's why. So if you call out the money and the corruption, then that is going to turn people away from that, or at least some people away from that. But if you're still trying to get people to play within the system, you're not going to expose those things. And that is very important for people to understand. And you also have to understand as well, Joe Biden's approval rating is lower than Donald Trump's was when he was up for re-election. They said it's lower than Bill Clinton. These are just the data that I looked at. Lower than Barack Obama, lower than George W. Bush. So it's not necessarily people who are making the decisions. Big money interest has made those decisions.
David, I can see some listeners look at the examples that you offered and say, well, those incumbents that had primary challenges against them didn't fare so well, and so maybe we should protect Biden against that from that eventuality. However, another way to read that is to say those incumbents got meaningful primary challenges because they were already showing a vulnerability. And perhaps if the political environment were more realistic about the need to sub in someone who could potentially be stronger, then there might have been a better outcome for the party in those instances. I mean, how are you reading this, and what do you think that Joe Biden's most significant vulnerabilities are that could potentially have been shored up by a primary contest or by a different candidate in particular? I know that you talked somewhat about Newsom kind of flirting with the candidacy in a kind of a shadow primary this year.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's hard to run back the counterfactuals, right? Did those incumbents lose because they were already weak, and that's why they got a primary challenge? Or did they lose because they got a primary challenge? I mean, I don't think it's the latter. I don't think those incumbents lost their bids for re-election because they faced a primary. And again, I go back to 2008, right? 2008 was a vicious primary, right? Obama and Clinton really, really vilified each other. And I don't think that weakened the eventual general election nominee. Just like
Pause. Again, I'm sorry. This is a horrible example to use. Hillary Clinton was not an incumbent. Barack Obama was not an incumbent at that point in time. He keeps bringing up 2008. The person in the White House at that point in time was George W. Bush, a Republican. That is not a good example. I don't know why people keep using the example of 2008, but you can't use that to compare what's happening right now in 2024 with Joe Biden. You really cannot. This is a different situation. So I'm not sure why he keeps using that example. I
don't think Bill Clinton in the 1992 primary was weakened by the very tough back and forth in that race. So I don't really buy that, but I guess nobody can really approve which way is the other. You have to run history back. But I would say this on your question about what Biden might have faced in a primary. I think Biden might have been forced to sharpen his economic message in the way that you saw him sharpen it in the State of the Union. Look, I thought the recent State of the Union address was a very good speech by Biden, an economic message that was strong. He has a decent economic story to tell about.
Let's jump in here. This is why he's not willing to call out the money and the corruption. So you see the pivot here. You see how he's trying to defend Joe Biden. He's calling out the fact that they weren't willing to allow him to have a serious primary challenge, meaning they weren't willing to allow debates, etc. But at the same time, he's also telling you that Joe Biden has a good economic story to tell. How many of you believe that? David Sirota is telling you that he needs to sharpen his economic story. Now, you got to remember, David Sirota was a speechwriter, right? Didn't he write speeches for Bernie Sanders? He was Bernie Sanders' speechwriter. Okay, so he's looking at this from the point of view as someone who wrote speeches instead of looking at the actual economy, instead of looking at the grocery prices, the gas prices, inflation, people losing their jobs, people being kicked off of unemployment because of Joe Biden. Joe Biden cutting Medicaid last year. Joe Biden cutting SNAP benefits. He's not looking at any of those things. He's repeating Democrat talking points, telling you that basically Joe Biden has to find a way to tell the message better. Tell the message better to people who are struggling to pay their rent. Tell the message better to people who got evicted after the pandemic. Tell the message to people who are struggling to pay for childcare. He's repeating those talking points. By doing that, he is giving people the impression that Joe Biden has a good economic story to tell. That is disingenuous.
His specific policies and about how the macro economy is better than it could be. He has a story to tell. He hasn't really had to tell it. Now, you could argue that perhaps he can't tell it, that he's just not a good enough politician, or he's an 81-year-old guy who's lost some skills. You could argue that, but the way to find that out, if you're a Democrat, where you'd want to find that out, is in the primary, where there's a potential replacement candidate if the potential incumbent cannot sell that message inside of his own party. But because there wasn't that primary contest, a really contested primary, now we're in a general election situation where if you are a Democrat and you want the Democrats to win, and you don't want Donald Trump to be president, now you're stuck with a nominee who really wasn't tested.
So let me just jump in here for a second. Thank you for saying this as well, Dritz. Record homelessness. Yes, we got to remember that homelessness actually increased by like 25% last time I checked. These are things that are very important to mention. But David Sirota tells you that Joe Biden has a good economic story to tell, but he doesn't tell you what that is. Why is that? He doesn't tell you what Joe Biden has done great for the economy, for your wallets, for your bank accounts. He hasn't had a chance to tell the story, David Sirota says. How many times has a mic been put in the front of Joe Biden's face? He's given many opportunities. He's had many opportunities to tell this story, to tell the story that he feels Joe Biden should tell. He's had multiple opportunities. That is a lame excuse. And you cannot sit here and use that excuse for the reason why Joe Biden hasn't used the time that he's had in front of the microphone to articulate what he feels he has done for the American people economically. This is the story that David Sirota is paid to tell. When you have a Democrat politician in the fam, of course, you are going to still support the Democratic Party, regardless if they're wrong, regardless if Joe Biden is not doing a good job. That's what David Sirota is paid to do.
Let me ask you this, David. Do you think that there's any chance, as some have speculated, there was a big Ezra Klein story about this maybe a month or so back now, that there could be a swapping out at the convention of who the Democratic candidate is? And if so, I mean, I wonder if you have any speculation about who a replacement for Joe Biden could or should be in that instance.
Listen to this.
It's hard for me to imagine Democratic Party culture, and I want to really hone in on that for a second. What we've been talking about, it's hard for me to imagine that Democratic Party culture, which has become a culture, a top-down culture, which has been Democratic rank and file, especially activists, have been sold on the idea that the party elders, the party bosses, the party elites choose nominees, and challenging them, questioning them, really pushing them on anything is bad. It's hard for me to believe that out of that process comes a convention in which there's a new nominee. Now, of course, Biden could say, I'm not going to run again. I guess he could say that. And there would be that process. And look, I think there are plenty of very strong and well-positioned Democratic candidates to run for president, some of whom I agree with, some of whom I don't agree with on all of the issues, right? Forgetting about are they conservative Democrats, progressive Democrats, or the like. I mean, you've got governors in Pennsylvania, you've got governor in Michigan, you've got a governor in, I think, Washington State, Jay Inslee, who I think is very good on climate, for instance. I think you've got Ro Khanna, who is a House member. I mean, the list, it's a long list. Gavin Newsom, you mentioned, right? I mean, there's a long list, and I'm not saying I agree with all of them or any of them, et cetera, et cetera. My point is there are potentially strong candidates there, but it's hard for me to imagine that a convention process even allows for that kind of debate. I mean, it's just not the culture of the Democratic Party. It's not a very small d Democratic culture.
He's right. It's not the culture, but again, he doesn't tell you why, and that's because of the money and the corruption and who controls the party. But the point that he made here when he mentions Ro Khanna, governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, these people that he's mentioning, and he tells you that these are strong candidates, what about them makes them strong? What is it about them that makes them a strong candidate? I'm really curious to hear from you guys about this, because we have to be careful about people just picking other people and just saying that they're strong and not giving you reasons why. I mean, Ro Khanna has flip-flopped on foreign policy, especially with Gaza. So let's think about that. I mean, how do you really know about these people? Oz is telling you Inslee's the one in Washington State. Inslee sucks on everything. He thinks he's great, I guess, because he's good on climate. What about these individuals make them a strong candidate? You got to give reasons for that, right? So if all of these people that he just mentioned in any way, shape, or form are in bed with the Israeli lobby, in any way, shape, or form are afraid to criticize the Israeli lobby, in any way, shape, or form has pledged some type of allegiance to the state of Israel, is that a strong candidate at this point in time? I would say no. I would say hell to the no. But this is where we are. So these are the things that we got to look into. You can't just say someone's a strong candidate because they're good on climate. And are they in bed with the Israeli lobby? Are they taking money from Big Pharma? Right? Are they a part of the military industrial complex? These are questions that need to be asked. Let's go on a little bit more here.
And can you speak maybe briefly to an issue that we've talked about in some other segments today, which is that the kind of legal efforts that the Democratic Party has undertaken to restrict ballot access for third-party candidates, be they Green Party candidates like Jill Stein or independent candidates like RFK Jr.?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is the classic case of both parties. This is really the characteristic of what's called the duopoly, that the duopoly doesn't want to make it easier for challengers to run outside of the duopoly's own system. I mean, that is a basic self-interest on the part of both parties. So it's not surprising. It's something that we should expect from both major parties. They are the monopoly or the duopoly, so they're trying to protect their market share. I think ultimately, though, the dissent is going to go somewhere. And this is a really important point, that you can suppress dissent and you can be successful in the short term at suppressing dissent. In the Democratic Party, for instance, you can cancel primaries, you can make ballot access harder, you can change the rules to kind of front load primaries. You can do all that. And in the short term, the dissent suppression probably can work at some level. But over the long haul, that dissent is going to go somewhere. And the problem with not having a contested primary where that dissent can at least be expressed is now you run the risk of having that dissent expressed in a general election arena in which the expression of that dissent in outside of the two parties could end up boosting somebody like Donald Trump.
There it is right there. He said all that word salad just to get to that point right there. So here is David Sirota instilling fear on the viewers that third party and independent candidates are not the way to go, even if you do have that dissent against Joe Biden. So you see how that works? So you see what he's doing? Nothing about their platforms, nothing about their message, nothing about the fact that not taking corporate money, nothing about the foreign policy, where these candidates stand on foreign policy, nothing about those things, nothing about where they stand on the issues. Just the fact that, well, if you support them, then you're helping Donald Trump. David Sirota is a Democrat hack. David Sirota writes very well. I will say he produces great articles. He's a great writer. I think that's where he should stay. Because when it comes to strategy, let's remember he was against force the vote. He was against it. He got that whole thing wrong and then still was against it, even though he was proven that he was wrong. So this is not someone that I would go to for strategy, right? So at the end of the day, people like David Sirota are there to keep you in the system that currently exists. I don't care if he wrote speeches for Bernie Sanders. David Sirota is there to make sure that you don't go somewhere else outside of this two-party system, that you stay within the Democratic Party. And I believe that when you have a family member that is a Democrat politician, it all sort of makes sense. We'll finish up with this here.
Now, I'm not making a value judgment on how people vote. Like, people have to choose how they want to vote in a general election. That's their choice. There's different logics and there's different arguments on both sides. But the point is, if you as a party suppress dissent in your own intra-party arenas, primaries, then you're running the risk of that dissent going somewhere else in a general election.
Wise words of wisdom that the Democratic Party should perhaps listen to. Not sure that they will. Thank you so much for joining us today, David Sirota. And can you tell us a little bit where people can find you at The Lever?
Yeah, so then they get into the Lever thing. He's working at The Lever. But the thing is that we have to be careful when we hear these messages from people like David Sirota. And they're very good at doing this dance, where they will call out the issues. They'll call out what's wrong with the Democratic Party. But then when you try to propose any other type of strategy, moving away from the two-party system, they will also say the same thing that the DNC says, that mainstream media says, which is that you're going to help Donald Trump. So, but I don't want to tell people how to vote, but you're going to help Donald Trump. You got to be careful about people that spew that type of rhetoric, because what they're doing is keeping you where you are. And I think in this society, given what's happening with the economy, given what's happening in reference to foreign policy and just how fed up people are with the US government, I think now is the time for people to break away from this duopoly and do something different. And we can't do that with people like David Sirota trying to still fearmonger you, making excuses for Joe Biden, and repeating mainstream media talking points. That we cannot do. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you for the super chat, Heidi. Love you, Sabby, for speaking the truth. Thank you so much. Shout out to Cool Blue. After his usual song and dance, Sirota votes Democrat. Exactly. And it's just, think about it. He was Bernie's speechwriter, and Bernie did the same thing. Bernie tells you all the problems, but at the end of the day, he keeps you exactly where you are. Jamie says lower than Bush. Yes, they went over the numbers actually on MSNBC. They showed the data that's how low Joe Biden's rating is. So when George W. Bush was up for re-election, his approval rating was still higher than Joe Biden. JB says, sharpen his message. How about Biden sharpen his actions and policies? Nothing about Biden is sharp. Just watch him walk a flight of stairs. Thank you for that. Shout out to Spark. He says Sirota is trying to convince himself. You can see that. Carmen says, does this guy have an economic story to tell? What is his income and his social C? I think you mean social class, maybe. Thank you, Natalie. Record homeless and 15.1 million empty homes, right? How is that a great economic story, right? Thank you, Sparky. Newsom Kushner 2024. That would be interesting. Shout out to Chris C. If Biden touted an honest economic message, it would destroy the narrative of Bidenomics. Trump would easily have a layup to the basket. Sir Pun LOL. Sir Pun? Thank you for this, New York. I always argue with Sabs about people who do things different from her are not always paid shills. This dude, ? Does nothing for my argument. Weasel. Thank you, Sparky. Great work. Love, Sabby. Love. Thank you. And thank you, Hayung. Love your show. Thank you so much. And welcome. All right. Go ahead and hit that like button, guys. Thank you very much. And we're going to go to the next story, which is really big news. And it ends on a very good note. So let's get into that. So you guys, we've been following the protests across college campuses that have been happening this week in reference to support for Palestinians in Gaza. The encampment started at Columbia University and then from there spread to NYU and other colleges. Now it has gotten to the point where colleges and actually California are also participating in encampments. Boston, you're going to see all of this. And then, of course, the University of Texas at Austin also decided to participate in these encampments as well. And Governor Abbott actually met them with, I would say, abrupt force that was unnecessary and uncalled for. But before we get there to what happened in Texas, because we do end on a good note with this story, we want to start with what happened in Columbia. Actually, representatives, you got to see this. Representative Mike Johnson actually went to speak at Columbia University. I guess he thought he would get through to people, and that didn't work out so well for him. So it was Mike Johnson, Virginia Fox, Nicole Malatakis, Anthony Despacito, and Mike Lawler. All of them came to Columbia University and they were met with a loud roar of boos. Listen to this.
Video guys, get your hand up. So, thank you all for being here today. We have several members of Congress here, and we're here.
So, yeah, Mike Johnson not being greeted well at Columbia University. There were lots of boos for him there, but it gets worse. So listen to this. He went on, he did have a speech. As much as he could get out. It goes on to say, at Columbia, after GOP leader Mike Johnson dismisses the hundreds of students protesting, telling them to go back to class, a reporter follows up. So he did not receive a warm welcome.
What is your message to the students inside the encampment right now?
My message to the students inside the encampment is go back to class and stop the nonsense. Look, if we want to have a debate on campus about the merits of these things, let's do that. But you can't intimidate your fellow students and make them stay home from class. Think about that. Is that right? Do you think that's right? Stop wasting your parents' money, Congressman Lawler says. I think that's right. Last one.
Anti-Zionist Jews inside the camp that are celebrating Shabbat.
I don't know who's in that camp over there, but I would tell you that this is unacceptable, and the American people are demanding accountability for it. And that's
no, we're not. The American people are not demanding that. So what Mike Johnson, the question that he was asked is, what about the anti-Zionist Jews that are participating in the encampment? He's like, well, I don't know who's a part of anything. Now all of a sudden he doesn't know who's a part of anything, but he's speaking about the people that are participating. And he goes on to say, the American people don't want, really? You're speaking for us, Mike? You're speaking for us, Mike Johnson. I have no problem with what's happening. I say kudos to those kids. I am proud of them. And they're doing the damn thing. You don't speak for me, Mike.
That's why we made the trip here today. That's why this press conference is important. We want this administration and the administration of every university campus around the country to bring this to account and to bring this lawlessness to an end. And that's what we need to do. Thank you.
So, yeah, he did not get the welcome that he thought he was going to get. I don't know why they sent him out there other than the fact that, well, he takes a lot of money from AIPAC. So he's one of their spokesperson, I would say, just like John Fetterman. You know, they send out these people that are going to support their message and their cause. And again, like I said, he's in bed with the Israeli lobby. But check this out, as though his exit was interesting. Listen to what is said to him when he exits. So that gentleman yelled, you know, get the F out of here. I'm trying to be careful with the profanity because, you know, they knock us for too much of it or whatever. But yeah, he told him to get out of here. So not the welcome that he was anticipating, but these protests, these encampments are continuing to spread across the country. You guys, we got to give a shout out to the students. Even in UCLA, you'll see this here as well. It has spread to the West Coast. Represent. UCLA says free Palestine. And I want to show you some of the signs that they have here.
I love those things.
So read this one, guys. It says free Palestine. This is the one I'm going to mute because I want to pause on this one. LAPD, KKK, they are all the, see that? LAPD, KKK, IOF, they are all the same. The kids are all right. The kids know what's happening. They understand. Now, I want you to hear from this father because he did the damn thing. Imagine being a student at one of these colleges and your dad shows up to show solidarity with you. He shows up to show solidarity with you for protesting for the Palestinian people. This guy is everything. Father shows up for his daughter protesting against genocide at USC, University of Southern California. Now, we'll have to remember, this is the school that canceled the Muslim student as the valedictorian speaker. Remember, they canceled her. Listen to this.
Yeah, I'm here with Lázaro Abuelo. You are a father of a student at USC who's here. Tell me why you're on campus. You also said you're a Los Angeles resident.
I am here to support my daughter. She's studying here, and they're protesting against the genocide. And that's why I am against the genocide. My family is against the genocide. We think that nobody, no kid deserves to be killed.
But why did you come down to campus?
Yeah, because my daughter started organizing too. So I say, we have to support Palestine. And that's why I am here. Not only to support Palestine, we want the genocide to stop.
Do you know where your daughter is right now?
Right now, gotta be somewhere because the police start chasing all the students. As you see, they are threatening, if we don't leave the campus, we are gonna be arrested. But the students are so brave. Look at them, they don't wanna leave the campus.
Does that concern you, though, as a father, that your daughter is somewhere?
Even though it concern me, but my daughter did the right decision. If she rather to be arrested fighting for Palestine, I will be the happiest daddy. I will be the happiest daddy if she's doing the right thing. And I know she's doing the right thing. If the police arrest me now, I am willing to go with the students. I have no problem because what I am doing is the right thing, fighting against a genocide. I have kids, not only the teenagers, I have a 7 years old, and I imagine being a father in Palestine to see my kid be assassinated by Israel. That's not good. We are humanity. This is not a matter of religion, political, no. We are humans. We cannot support any genocide.
Well, we will let you go and find your daughter, and I appreciate you talking to us.
Free Palestine, always.
Thank you for talking to us.
With Palestine, always.
Isn't that just heartfelt, you guys? You see how someone's dad came out there to stand in solidarity? This is solidarity, guys. This is not unity. This is going beyond unity. This is putting someone else's needs before your own. So kudos to that dad. Remember him on Father's Day. Remember him on Father's Day. Now we get to Northeastern, my alma mater, at least for grad school. Northeastern University right here in Boston. You're going to see they got together as well. I told you it would spread. Around 200 Northeastern students have taken over a park in the center of campus. Small number of campus police on the scene. Look at this. Shout out to Northeastern because usually things don't get lit over there. So that's Northeastern. Again, I went there for grad school. So it was great to see them also stand in solidarity. Now we're going to move into what happened in Texas, because Texas is probably where I would say the University of Texas, where most of the violence seemed to be a little bit more extreme, because Governor Abbott decided to call in the state troopers to confront these kids who were protesting peacefully. And you can see that actually starting here, where it says, here's the scene from the current focal point of the UT Austin protest off of 22nd Street Southwest of the main building. So you see the police are here on horses and everything. This is Stonewall. They are chanting, "Who failed Uvalde?" Because what was interesting to me, the way that these troopers could respond to these peaceful protests as though it was an urgent situation, and their lack of response to the school shooting in Uvalde is very telling here, folks. This goes back to what I've said before, that police aren't really trying to solve no damn crime. They're here to be bullies. They're here to intimidate people who are actually exercising their First Amendment rights, who are protesting peacefully. But when it came time for them to actually act urgently in a violent situation and save kids' lives, they failed. Where were they? Where was this sense of urgency from the state police in Texas when those kids were held hostage by another freaking guy who was killing kids in the school, and you couldn't even go in within 1 hour of being on the scene? Where were you? Where was that sense of urgency, Uvalde? Governor Abbott, where was the urgency then? Because they're big and bad standing up against people who are unarmed and exercising their First Amendment right. But when it comes time for them to actually do their damn job and face real danger, they cower. And that's why I say defund the police. Because our tax dollars are going towards the police officers to harass and intimidate and beat people peacefully protesting instead of tracking down criminals, okay? Some of them are spending more time at Dunkin' Donuts than they are actually doing their damn job. Now, we're going to break down what happened in Texas here. We're going to bring up this clip here from News Nation. Let me just fast forward a little bit here. They had a reporter there on the scene. I think you need to hear this as well, because this is definitely overreach and this is fascism. They are sending in the police state to stop you from exercising your First Amendment right. And I don't care what political ideology you have. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. This is a problem.
It's been a very tense couple of hours, a violent couple of hours. hours since these protesters, about 200 students, were met with a heavy, immediate police presence. We learned of these plans last night when a group called the Palestinian Solidarity Committee intended to host a mass walkout from class and a sit-in on the main lawn just below that iconic UT Tower. But UT warned them almost immediately that they will not be allowed to do that. The university said that they believe that would be disruptive and said that they need to cancel the protest. Of course, they did not cancel it, and they were met by riot troopers from the Department of Public Safety, from UT's own police, and they ended up arresting about 6 to 8 students, is what we believe right now, for trespassing or for disrupting. We did not see anything overtly violent from any of the protesters, but nonetheless, the university is certainly going to look into disciplining those students that.
Look at this. So the police officers showed up in riot gear. They showed up in riot gear to approach students. Militarized police, we cannot have. We are living in a police state in this country. I tried to warn people about this during the Black Lives Matter protest. Some of you were more concerned about property being destroyed than the actual police state who were harassing peaceful protesters. The mask is off, folks. The mask is off. If some of you had a problem with the way police approached the situation on January 6th and you felt like those people were exercising their right, then you also should feel the same way about the students protesting on these campuses. You should also feel that they're exercising their right, okay? Let the partisanship go.
Disobeyed their order to cancel that protest. It's finally dispersed after a very tense couple of hours. But, you know, I'll tell you, I went to UT just a few years ago, and this university has a culture of protest. Their students are very politically active, and this is going to be a wound that is going to take some time to heal on this campus. Take a look at some of the reaction that we got from students in the middle of that protest today.
I was next to one of the organizers. He had successfully gotten everybody's attention. Listen up, people were silent, and he was trying to organize people to disperse, literally doing what the police had told him to do. Mid-sentence, he gets tackled to the ground by 5 heavily armed officers and dragged up. This is a giant escalation of what would have been a peaceful protest.
Yep. Because the police show up to these events and they actually escalate the situation. It's not just that gentleman there. There was also a photographer that was arrested. This is crazy. They were just basically taking anybody out that was in the vicinity. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? That reminds you of the IDF. The IDF is not like they say they're looking for Hamas. They're out to kill any and everything that is in that vicinity, regardless if it's Hamas or not. The police are trained by the IDF. So you have to understand they're using some of the same tactics when they confront people in this country. This is all connected. So this guy who was just doing his damn job, he was arrested by the police. Shout out to Philip Lewis, a photographer for Fox 7 in Austin, was arrested during the protest. This guy wasn't protesting. He was just doing his damn job.
Who are you with?
I'm with Fox 7.
Fox 7?
Yeah,
What's your name?
Carlos.
Carlos, what do you think of this?
I think it's, they were pushing me, and they say that I hit an officer. I didn't hit an officer. They were pushing. You know what I mean? They were pushing me.
I'm a legal observer. What's your name and date of birth? We're going to send attorneys to you.
Has this ever happened?
No, it's never happened to me. You know what I mean? I was just covering things.
Did you tell them you were the press?
Yeah, I told them that I was the press. This one says I was hitting an officer. I was not hitting nobody. You know what I mean?
So you know what he said here? He told him that he was a part of the press. They didn't care. They arrested him anyway.
Does that sticker poke me?
This is what I've been telling you guys again about the police state. And this happens under Republican Party leadership and Democrat Party leadership. Believe it or not, one thing that Democrats and Republicans agree on, at least the party leadership, is that we need to keep giving the police more money. Don't you remember Joe Biden said we got to fund the police? They agree with this. They agree with militarizing the police. They agree with the police state. Don't get it twisted. Don't get out here thinking that the Democratic Party doesn't approve of the police state. They do approve of it. They're funding it. Those of us that said defund the police, we are far and few. We are not the majority. And those of us on the left who were saying that we're heavily scrutinized for saying defund the police. Somehow, next thing I knew, the Democratic Party took credit for defund the police. Most of those people do not want to defund the police. They want to give the police more money. Don't think that there is a difference between these two parties when it comes to policing. They want us living in a fascist state. This is what they are doing. It doesn't matter if it's Trump or Biden. They want complete control of the people. That's why they want to put surveillance on all of you. That's why they want to watch you. That's why they want facial recognition software. That's why they want to keep tabs on you. They don't want anybody to rise up for any type of revolution or their real rights in this country. And it's happening under both parties. And everybody needs to wake up. This gentleman here, listen to what he says about how the police came in and escalated the situation.
Most definitely. If the police had never came, we would have followed the schedule set out by PSC. It was a variety of scholastic teach-ins, lunch breaks. It was, study hours on the lawn, a peaceful demonstration. And now that the police have come, it has now turned into like a clash of students wanting our own campus sovereignty and UT Austin and UTPD and state troopers trying to quell dissent.
There you go. What did I tell you? And I've seen it happen multiple times before because I've been present at several protests. So I'm familiar with these things happening. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, yes, they show up and things get worse. But the UT students, they prevailed. Because you see, they actually returned back to the South Lawn. Give it up for the damn students. It says UT Austin protesters have returned to the South Lawn. Let's go. Stop the killing, stop the crime. Israel out of Palestine. Justice is our demand. No peace on stolen land. Justice is our demand. No peace on stolen land. Up with liberation. Down, down with occupation. I have to remind myself sometimes that we have to have faith in the younger generation. And those of you watching, if you were like me, right? So if you were a millennial like me, think back to how you felt when you were their age, when we were in undergrad, or even if you weren't in undergrad, but you were in that age bracket. Think about how you felt during that time when you felt like people, the older generation, didn't take you seriously or didn't have faith in you. I'm here to tell you, I think we need to say that the kids are going to be all right. We got to have faith that they know what they're doing, and we got to let them do their thing. This is not to say you can't join along with them. You can join along with them. Just don't come in there and try to take over things. Okay? But we got to have faith in these kids that they are going in the right direction and they can do it. Think back for those of you, if you were part of the Vietnam War protests, how did you feel when people of older generations basically said, oh no, those kids, what are they doing? No, you were right. Those of you out there, you were protesting against the Vietnam War, you were right. Those of you who protested against the Iraq War, you were right. And these kids out there right now protesting against genocide, they are right. So we got to have a little bit more faith in them. And this is why I say this, because I do have good news about this. We already have one victory. New York, the University of Rochester, SDS, and URSJP statement on occupation for Palestine. Let's bring it on in home. So you can see they had encampments there. Here's some good news, folks. As of April 24th, the administration of University of Rochester has announced that UR will move forward with an academic boycott from all ties to Israel. Let's say this again, folks. As of April 24th, the administration of University of Rochester has announced that UR will move forward with an academic boycott. What? An academic boycott from all ties to Israel. Let's give it up for the students. Give it up for the students. We had to do a little bit of a bounce there because I told you some of these schools will come around. Let's go. It is game time, son. It is game time. And we have a message here from a Holocaust survivor. I want you to hear what he said. He is saying that the students should not stop what they are doing. Let's bring it in.
As a Holocaust survivor, my message to the brave student protesters in America is just keep doing it. Don't give up. We are doing exactly the same. And in the long term, we are going to prevail. I'm out from the beginning at every march. A small group of survivors and descendants of survivors demonstrate disagreement with the use of the Holocaust experience as a cover by the Zionists and the State of Israel.
What's happening on America's college campuses is horrific. This is reminiscent of what happened in German universities in the 1930s.
The way that the Israeli government is using the memory of the Holocaust in order to justify what they are doing to the Gazans is a complete insult to the memory of the Holocaust. And we stand repeated in the last few demos carrying placards hanging from the neck saying this survivor of the Holocaust is against the genocide in Gaza. And we also demonstrate against the conflating of Jewishness with Zionism, which is what the Israeli state is trying to do, which does nothing else but increases anti-Semitism. So we are trying to counter that by demonstrating that Jews and Holocaust survivors are against that. We have.
You hear what he's saying? You see, people like him, they don't want you to hear from. They don't want you to hear this guy. People like him, Netanyahu would point to and say that he's not a real Jewish person. You guys have heard these statements before, right? But he's telling you the truth about Zionism. Problematic. And how crazy it has become. He's telling the students to keep doing what you're doing.
Tremendously warm reception and appreciation from the typical members of the march. We get handshakes and hugs, and some people stand and some women cry seeing the placards. It's a great and warm experience. When the right-wing section of the present government is trying to press for the banning of these marches on the grounds that they create no-go areas for Jews and they are anti-Semitic. We know that this is complete rubbish, and the very opposite is true. Today's marches are having a very hopeful aspect, that it is so large, so persistent, so global, that eventually the Western leadership, which are trying to deny what is actually going on, will be forced to face up to it. And I think we are not far from that. I think there was no parallel to that in the Jewish Holocaust experience. In fact, there was great abandonment, certainly from the leadership of the country. There were some, very few, very brave people who risked everything to be on the right side of history and to rescue as much as possible. But the majority of people were too afraid and looked the other way. There is a question of historic responsibility towards injustice, genocide, and fascism. If you are just indifferent, if you do not take a stand, you acquire a degree of guilt without any doubt. And I think it is imperative to assert opposition and even at some degree of disadvantage and risk.
Remember his words, right? So we need more heroes like him. We need more people like him to stand up. You know, they're trying to silence people like him. They're telling people, people like Alan Dershowitz, they're out there repeating on people's shows that people that are part of Jewish Voices for Peace aren't real Jewish people. Like, you know, the amount of lies that have been told, it's really disgusting when you think about it. But we need people like that. So shout out to him for being vocal, and shout out to the damn students for doing the damn thing. And what you see happening in Texas right now is just another reminder to you folks that both parties support the fascist police state, the militarized fascist police state, and that both parties are not pro-free speech. It took Candace Owens being fired from the Daily Wire for some people to get that, but hey, we all here. At the end of the day, both parties want to control what you do, what you see. They want to know where you're going. And that's what Edward Snowden tried to get people to understand. It's us and the oligarchs, folks. Political parties, it doesn't matter because both of them support the oligarchs. Both of them support the military-industrial complex, and both of them support putting the American people last. That's just how it is. They're not trying to help you, especially if you're working class or you're poor. So a shout out to those students for doing the damn thing. The Oracle says, due to the atrocities being perpetuated in the name of Zionism, conflating it with anti-Semitism only increases a type of misguided anti-Semitism. That's right. And that's the scary part about it. Because the reality is there are people who are anti-Semitic. And when real incidents, real serious incidents of anti-Semitism happens, you know, it kind of just, it takes away from that. Let's go to some of the comments here. Shout out to Courtney Smith says, those boos kind of had a WWE vibe to it. All they were missing were the asshole chat. Yeah. Thank you, Sparky. I'm not sure if Louisiana District will re-elect Mike Johnson after he's so blatantly sold out. Thank you, Heidi. Thanks, Sabby. These children are our future. Do not arrest them. I believe the children are our future. Thank you, Tates. Zionists enslaved Palestine for 75 years, but now they started the same tactics to enslave Americans. And thank you, Jay. Kim Iverson just did a report tonight on how these riot police officers are trained by Israel. Yes, it's utterly horrific and pathetic. Yes. And this is why I want people to make the connection. They're connected. The way you see the IDF treating the Palestinian people, Do you see some of those same things happening with police in the United States? Look at the way they treat protesters here. And some of the videos that I saw on social media, I can't even show you on here. Bad Cookie says, hey, Sabby, there are Hamas in those students. BB told me so. JB says, one thing people need to consider, the courts are also in league with the police state. Judges, DAs, AGs are also not our friends. This is why the system must be rebuilt from the ground up. Wake up. Yeah, especially the judges that are appointed. You're not appointed as a judge just because you did a good job. Thank you, Amaterasu? Interesting. Sabby, that's China, right? Question mark. US could never. Thank you, Tavis. As a millennial, we need to stand by these kids, behind these kids. Yes, I totally hear you, Tavis. And I know some people are like, why do you call them kids? Like, because to me, they kind of, they're young. They remind me of my students. My students were around that age, Thank you, Jojo. Your audience, when you put on the music. Oh, did you guys like the music? I didn't see the comments because I was dancing. But thank you, MTG. I was at Battle for Seattle in 1999. I have never looked at my country, America, the same. Masked instigators bust in by the government to create chaos. And that's another thing. There will be people who will infiltrate the protests to make it seem like the people who are peacefully protesting are being violent. Saw that with BLM too. We need critical thinking says, hey, chat, has Sabby ever danced on the show? I don't think so. But I didn't have music I could play. And like StreamYard now has this newer thing where you can add audio as long as it's not, copyright. So yeah. Yeah, man. Let's get the comment on Rockfin and we'll go to the next story. Thank you. Thank you so much for the tip on Rockfin. JVB in the house. I felt like we had to dance to that, right? That was a celebration moment. All right. Go ahead and smash the like if you haven't had a chance to do so. Thank you, guys. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Quick announcement before the last story, so I do not forget, because I will. Tomorrow, don't do that, please don't. I didn't even see myself dancing, so I don't want to. Don't do it. Anywho, sorry. Let's go in here. Tomorrow, before I forget, tomorrow I am live at 2 p.m. Eastern time, not 8 p.m. because Scott Ritter is going to be here. So Scott is available in the afternoon. So I'm going to go live at 2 p.m. Eastern. I think that stream's already set up. I just have to hit play to push it through. But 2 p.m. tomorrow Eastern time with Scott Ritter. And then we will do a quick Zoom call in after that. Okay. Based. No, don't do it. Moving on. Ben Shapiro is not too happy with Tucker Carlson. Again, this is not the first time. Apparently, the appearance that Tucker Carlson made on Joe Rogan's show really does have Ben Shapiro up in arms. Ben Shapiro is not too happy with Tucker Carlson speaking this anti-war rhetoric, which he basically points out in this video. It's wild when you think about it. He considers this to be like a left talking point. So let's go ahead and get into this discussion from Ben Shapiro. It is a mess, okay? It is a hot mess.
There's a weird horseshoe theory thing that's happening here. We've talked about it before on the program, that you have this constellation of far leftists who are rather friendly toward Hamas, who generally are isolationist on foreign policy, but they're isolationist on foreign policy mainly because they believe that the United States is a nefarious force in the world. They're sort of Howard Zinn or Noam Chomsky with regard to American foreign policy. America is actually bad. That horseshoe theory has now swung all the way around, and it includes some people on the right. Now, as we'll talk about in a moment, when it comes to isolationism, as we've discussed, there are a bunch of different perspectives within the isolationist perspective. There is the we should not get involved in foreign conflicts no matter what perspective because we need the money here at home, which means that you're also in favor of cutting spending by the government on a wide variety of other subjects. There's also an isolationism that suggests that whenever America gets involved in foreign conflicts, that tends to taint the United States, not it's about the United States tainting the rest of the world. But there is a theory that has now risen on the right that there is something deeply malign about the United States, something deep.
Let me pause here for a second. So the thing is this, I'm sorry, but the United States government we are the country that has bases all over the world. What other country has like 800 bases across the world? Can't think of one. We are the ones trying to police other countries, not the other way around, right? We are the ones who steal resources from a lot of these countries. We're not the only ones. The UK has done this as well, but usually it's us. We are the ones that create regime change in other countries. We're the ones trying to overthrow other leaders in other countries. So I'm not sure what Ben is talking about, but yes, when you look at the research and when you look at the history, all roads seem to lead back to us.
Wrong with the United States. This was made apparent over the weekend. Tucker Carlson was on Joe Rogan's show. Obviously, I'm very friendly with Joe. I think Joe does a great job during his interviews. And there was a clip from this interview that went particularly viral. This is a clip in which Tucker Carlson calls the United States evil for having dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, ending World War II, and then suggests that anyone who would justify that is also evil, which is a very traditionally left-wing perspective.
Why is it a left-wing perspective to be against dropping bombs on civilians? I mean, I'm looking at this in reference to a humanitarian issue. Like, why is that? That shouldn't even be a left position. And it seems apparent to me that Ben Shapiro is not aligned with the anti-war right or conservatives or libertarian base. He doesn't seem to be aligned with them. He's perfectly fine with civilians dying. And you can see that from the rhetoric that he has about Israel and Gaza. He's totally fine with that because he feels like at the end it serves a greater good. But we have to ask this question: a greater good according to who? And what is the greater good? And is the greater good actually a greater good or greater evil?
It is not traditionally a particularly right-wing perspective because most people on the conservative side of the aisle tend to believe that America is a force for good in the world. And as we'll discuss, it turns out that dropping the atomic bomb on Japan was necessary for ending World War II and likely saved millions of lives, both American and Japanese. But here is Tucker.
Well, you could say the same about the atomic bomb, right?
Yes, you could.
And you could say that we have to develop it like Oppenheimer felt before the Nazis did.
I love that. How'd that work?
Pause. Look, Oppenheimer was conflicted about that. This is a piece that we cannot leave out. Oppenheimer is not like he was jumping up and down for joy after this. He struggled with this and the fact that so many people were killed. Even before it was used, he struggled with the fact that, wait a minute, this is so powerful that this could actually probably, decimate an entire population of people. Maybe this isn't a good thing after all. Everyone likes to bring this up. They like to bring up Oppenheimer. They like to bring up, the atomic bomb. But they leave out the fact that Oppenheimer struggled with this decision. And I think that's important for people to hear. That piece of it right there.
How'd that work?
Well,
I love, by the way, that people on my side, I'll just admit it, on the right, have spent the last 80 years defending dropping nuclear weapons on civilians. Like, are you joking?
Right.
That's just like prima facie evil.
Yeah.
If you can't, if we hadn't done that, then this, that, the other thing, that was actually a great savings. Like, no, it's wrong to drop nuclear weapons on people. And if you find yourself arguing that it's a good thing to drop nuclear weapons on people, then you are evil. Like it's not a tough one, right? It's not a hard call for you. It's not a hard call for me. So with that in mind, like, why would you want nuclear weapons? It's like just a mindless, childish sort of intellectual exercise to justify, like, oh no, it's really good because someone else will get it. How about no? How about
And I agree with him here. And I don't agree with Tucker Carlson on a lot of things, but I agree with him here about nuclear weapons. I don't think we should have nuclear weapons. I don't think anyone should have nuclear weapons. I don't think nuclear weapons should have ever been developed, period. But they were developed. And the problem that you run into is that some countries have them, some countries don't. Anybody can get trigger happy one day and just go, whoopsie. So I do not support it at all. But the point that Tucker Carlson is making here is like, how could you be happy about annihilating, just innocent people? What's good about that? How does that make you feel good at the end of the day? Unless you believe the narrative by the State Department and mainstream media, which is that the United States is the good guys and everybody else is bad and we have to weed them out.
Like spending all of your effort to prevent this from happening.
Okay, actually, what would be childish is to assume that there are no other players in the world, for example, trying to develop nuclear weapons. The fact is the Nazis were trying to develop nuclear weapons. There was, in fact, a nuclear arms race that was happening at the time. Not only that, as it turns out, the Soviet Union then developed nuclear weapons. And it is mutually assured destruction and nuclear deterrence that has kept the world largely from sinking into another World War III-like mass casualty morass because of the horror of dropping the nuclear bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the first place. By the way, when he said...
So because other countries were developing nuclear weapons, that gives the U.S. government the excuse to drop the atomic bomb. That makes that okay. So the point that Ben Shapiro is not taking here, the stance that he is not taking, is the fact that we shouldn't applaud nuclear weapons, period. It should have never happened. Nuclear weapons should be disbanded, period, all across the board. Stop with the nukes. You would think that Ben Shapiro would advocate for that, but not if you're totally fine with the destruction of innocent people, which he apparently is totally fine with. This is why he has no problem about all the people being killed in Gaza, because Ben Shapiro believes it serves a greater good for Israel. And he wants to talk about World War III. Who's bringing us closer to World War III right now? Russia or Israel? Think about it, folks.
There's things like, how exactly would you justify? Why are we talking about how many lives it would save? It's just wrong to drop the bomb. Well, no, actually, if you end up saving more lives than are cost by the dropping of the atomic bomb, then it is morally justified to drop the atomic bomb. And that happens to be the reality of the situation. Evan Thomas wrote in the Washington Post fairly recently, the commanders of the Japanese armed forces were fanatics. On August 9th, after Washington dropped the second bomb on Nagasaki, Japan's war minister, General Korichika Anami, asked his fellow members of the Supreme War Council, quote, would not it be wondrous for the whole nation to be destroyed like a beautiful flower? The rulers were...
Pause. It is not acceptable, period. It is not acceptable. Do you hear what he's saying? Ben Shapiro, it seems like to me, he's still stuck in 2003 George W. Bush neocon era. And the thing is, whether you looking at Republicans or Democrats, more and more people on the right are also calling out the war complex and the war industry that the U.S. government has gotten us all into. More people are calling that out. More people on the right and the left combined are calling out the war culture and the military industrial complex. Who is Ben speaking to? What is the Daily Wire now? What is it? What is it? Remember, even Candace didn't agree with this. So it's just, this is not popular, Ben. This is not a popular thing anymore. I can't believe you sit there making excuses for killing innocent people.
Fatalistic about taking the rest of the nation with them. The 1 million will die for the emperor was a common headline in the state-controlled press, even after Hiroshima and Nagasaki had been destroyed, and after the Russians had even invaded Japanese-occupied Manchuria. 6 members of the Supreme War Council deadlocked 3-3 on whether to surrender. After the dropping of the second bomb, when Emperor Hirohito decided that he wanted to end the debate and surrender, he had to run away from members of his own military who were threatening to kidnap him and who are trying to find the recording of him surrendering before it could be broadcast on radio to destroy the recording. So yes, it turns out that it was necessary. By the way, if we had not dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the alternative was either an amphibious assault that would have cost probably 1 million American lives, or more likely a giant blockade of the island of Japan, including the mass starvation of the civilian population.
We don't know that. We don't know what would have happened because we did choose to drop the bomb. So we really don't know, Ben. I just, now all of a sudden you care about an entire population of people possibly starving. We're supposed to believe you care about that. That's what he said would have happened. Entire population of people in Japan would have ended up starving. So it's okay to kill them? You care about starving people all of a sudden? You don't care about the starving people in Gaza? Let's get out of here. Let's stop. Let's stop. No.
Resulted in millions of dead Japanese. So why is Tucker just abandoning the moral equation here at all? What is he doing here? That's what's sort of fascinating. Now, I think to understand what Tucker's doing here, you have to understand that this particular interview included a lot of conspiratorial thinking. So he tries to explain it. He says that he was actually radicalized by 2017. That basically until 2017, he believed a lot of narratives that were told by the government and by the mainstream media. And then after 2016, 2017, when it appeared that the intelligence community was militarized against Donald Trump, this is what radicalized him into basically becoming uber critical of everything. This is his story.
Probably unlike you, I didn't have any opinions like that. I was like, fluoride, come on. Yeah. UFOs, you're crazy. You know what I mean? I just I had this reflexive, I'm ashamed of it. I'm not bragging about it. But it was 2017, and really it was the Trump campaign. It wasn't that I was like so in love with Trump, though I've always liked Trump because he's like hilarious and charming and all that. But I wasn't like a Trumper or anything. But it was watching that campaign, and particularly his claim that they were spying on him. And I was like, really? You're not... The intel services and federal law enforcement, FBI, do not spy on presidential campaigns. Like, that's so out of the realm. That's so crazy. Like, that could never happen because, of course, there's no democracy in a system like that. And fundamentally, we're a democracy, an imperfect one. It kind of lumbers along, but like, it's not fake. And then that turned out to be true. And I knew it was true. And that just blew my mind. So I began a process still ongoing of reassessing a lot of other things. Like,
this was really interesting to me because this was a revealing moment because it shows you that Tucker Carlson at one point actually believed that we had a true democracy in this country. And he believed that government agencies would never spy on politicians or whoever. That's really revealing moment. Because I don't know. I think a lot of us watching have always been skeptical of government agencies.
Okay, well, if that was not true, what else is not true? And what else that they told me was a conspiracy theory might actually have some basis in fact. And
okay, so in other words, he went all the way from I believe all the narratives to I believe none of the narratives. In fact, I believe the counter of the set of facts with which I am presented. Now, first of all, let me just say about 2016, 2017. Yes, it is incredibly disturbing that the intelligence community was militarized against Donald Trump on the basis of a bunch of trumped up nonsense from the Hillary Clinton campaign. Also, if this exploded your worldview as a conservative, that I find that surprising. Because as a conservative, you're supposed to be generally skeptical of government power. And not only that, if you know anything about presidential history, you know that a wide variety of presidential campaigns have been spied on by the administration in power. In 1940,
Let me pause here for a second. Greg Bruce says, and it gets significantly more vulgar. Yeah, that's funny. Listen to this. He said that as a conservative, you're supposed to be skeptical, I guess, of the government. Okay. But you can't be skeptical of government agencies? Because isn't that just what Tucker Carlson was talking about intel and stuff like that? So you can be skeptical of the government, but you can't be skeptical of government agencies? Hell, listen, believe it or not, like all my friends are not lefties. Most of my family members don't even vote. Most of my family members are not, they don't believe in like the voting system. They're not Democrats, Republicans, anything like that, right? So I have friends that are conservative. I have friends that are liberal, friends that are progressive, socialists, etc., all throughout the spectrum. And what's really interesting is that I have never heard one of them, say that they trust the government agencies, whether it's the FBI, the CIA, Intel, any of that. Never heard one of them say that. Not one. But it's true what he's saying here about spying on politicians.
For example, the Wendell Willkie campaign was pretty clearly spied on by the FBI at the behest of FDR. In 1964, LBJ literally bugged Barry Goldwater's headquarters in 1964. Famously, in 1972, the Richard Nixon campaign spied on the campaign of George McGovern, right? That's what Watergate was all about. So actually, there's a fairly well-predicated history of the instruments of law enforcement being misused, which is why there's been a hot debate about the utility of various law enforcement agencies on the right. This has been going on literally my entire lifetime and well before. Okay, but according to Tucker, that radicalized him. And now he went from supposedly believing everything to believing the reverse of everything. Now, that is actually not critical thinking.
You can't really talk about critical thinking, though, Ben, because you went from saying facts don't care about your feelings and having this rap song with this dude where you were saying that you don't care if, you offend people, but you were offended very quickly the moment people started to push back on Israel's actions towards Gaza. So your whole facts don't care about your feelings and all that jazz that you made a lot of money off of goes right out the door. So you really have no room to talk about critical thinking. Get out of here.
That's actually not critical thinking. If what you said is, I took in everything too much, too easily without examining the evidence, and so now I'm going to take a stronger look at the evidence before I come to a conclusion, that would be critical thinking. But saying that the evidence that is presented to you is of the instruments of law enforcement being misused, which is why there's been a hot debate about the utility of various law enforcement agencies on the right. This has been going on literally my entire lifetime and well before. Okay, but according to Tucker, that radicalized him. And now he went from supposedly believing everything to believing the reverse of everything. Now, that is actually.
Now, you were against cancel culture. He's probably the worst person to make this argument. You were against cancel culture. That is one of the reasons why the Daily Wire was started, right? It's supposed to be a beacon of free speech against the cancel culture and the woke rhetoric, so to speak. You were against all those things, Ben, but at the same time, the moment the subject became Israel, all of a sudden you were all for the cancel culture, all for it. So you did a similar thing that you're saying Tucker Carlson did. All of a sudden, you went all the way to the other side as well. You flipped.
Facts don't care about your feelings. Facts don't care. I don't care if I offend you.
Actually not critical thinking. That's actually not critical thinking. If what you said is, I took in everything too much, too easily without examining the evidence, and so now I'm going to take a stronger look at the evidence before I come to a conclusion, that would be critical thinking. But saying that the evidence that is presented to you is now of no consequence whatsoever, that no evidence provided is sufficient because the source cannot be trusted, that they are lying to you, that they're always lying to you, always, and that no counter evidence is necessary to support your new thesis because, again, they're lying to you and they've hidden all the evidence. We are now in the world of the unfalsifiable. Any evidence against your new thesis is discounted by the fact that it's coming from a source that lies to you. And no evidence for your thesis is available. Why? Because they hid it and they are lying to you.
This is not about a thesis because Tucker Carlson is not writing a dissertation here, but whatever, here we are. Anyhow, what's really interesting about all of this is that it's almost like, I hope Tucker Carlson does a clapback video. I hope, and I'm not even a fan of Tucker Carlson, but I hope Tucker Carlson sees this video and I hope he does a clap back video at Ben Shapiro. And I'm pretty sure he may know more things about Ben than I do, but I'm just calling out the things that I saw that were right out in the open about the statements that Ben made about cancel culture, etc. Right. So I hope he responds to this video from Ben and claps back real hard. Can he do that? Is that okay for him to do that, guys? I think that is okay. I think it is okay. You can see the rest of the video, of course, on Ben Shapiro's channel. But we got to point out the hypocrisy here, folks. You know, you really have no room to sit up here and say someone flipped completely like this when you did the same thing. And now you've gone on multiple podcasts to basically make it seem like this wasn't your fault and you did not change your position, etc. But you did. But you did, okay? So you can just go back to saying wet ass P word and just keep it to yourself. Because honestly, I can't. I can't, man. I can't. This is, oh my God, the Daily Wire must be hurting right now. Is the Daily Wire hurting? You guys let me know. Are they struggling? No, I don't know. You must be hurting right now. But never forget what Ben told you from the get-go. Facts don't care about your feelings. What a mess. Thank you, Snork, for the super chat. We aren't talking the 7 worst texts after nuke. I think I skipped. Yes, I did. Sorry. Thank you for this one. Amateur Atsu. I don't know what you're talking about, but let's go in there. And then I think I'm supposed to go to this one next. We aren't talking the 7 worst texts after nuke. Thank you for that. Nina, sweetie, I don't know what happened to your super chat. My super chat didn't show up and it charged me. I'm sorry to hear that. But I think Eric said he looked for it. Yeah, he doesn't see. I'm so sorry. That wouldn't be a me thing. Django says, no, it was not necessary to use the bomb. More people were killed by incendiary bombs than both atomic bombs combined. Read a book. Thank you, Sparky. Top U.S. generals and admirals, presumably conservative in World War II, were against dropping atomic bombs on Japan. Thank you for that, Sparky. JB says the U.S. was the only nation to use nukes on a civilian population. And David says, I'm upset. I bought 2 subscriptions to The Lever. He also had his first podcast on Apple. He kept saying that Joe Biden has a story to tell. Blew my mind. Sirota did not call out genocide Joe. I wonder why. Conspiriality says this MFer was supposed to be really smart. Wet ass P word. Thank you, Sparky. Oppenheimer wasn't conflicted and continued developing nukes for 5 more years. He came up with, now I have become death, the destroyer of worlds years later. He actually said, wow, it worked. I've seen different opinions about that. I've read different things about that, about how he felt after the atomic bomb. Thank you for this as well. In World War II, Germany gave up their nuke program on their own. They never got close. By the way, Ben Shapiro is an annoying pawn of the establishment. And thank you, Jay. Sabby, it's time to start planning your 100K subscribers live stream party. It's coming real soon. I don't like to plan these things. Oh no, the Ben voice just rubbed off on me. Yikes. I don't like to plan those kind of things. I'll figure something out. We'll get there first and then see if something happens, and we'll go there. Thank you also, NH Libra. You are pretty good at impersonation, Sabby. Oh, thank you so much. That's really sweet. I can make a habit of that. That will be very, very interesting. Hedges Gospel said, I love your impression of Ben Sabby, wet ass P word, funny shit. I'll always remember that. I will always remember that. Let me get the comment on Rockfin, Eric. I'll never forget that, man. Thank you, Dave, for the tip on Rockfin. Thank you, RBN, Sabs, Eric, for the coverage. You are welcome. Yeah. Maybe I will for that, Brent. We know there will be a new dance clip to watch at 100K. If I get to 100K, I can dance again. I can dance for you guys. But I was really pumped about the students. You know, I really do have a lot of faith in them, and I think they're doing the damn thing. Yeah. And I'm trying to think of what I would title that Ben Shapiro, Tucker Carlson clip for tomorrow. Long ass title ever. Ben Shapiro blames Tucker Carlson for doing the same damn thing he literally did. No, that's too long of a title. I don't even think that'll fit because there's a limit with how many characters that you can use in the titles. I don't even think that'll fit. That would be funny though. Oh man. Okay. Time for me to go, guys. Tomorrow, don't forget, Scott Ritter will be here 2 p.m. Eastern time. That'll be an early live stream tomorrow. And then we'll go right into the call in on Zoom right after that. Gotta go, bro. Yo. All right, guys. You know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.